The late-night customer. The reek of fryer grease clung to Jake, an old factory shroud he couldn't shake. Point one more hour. The microwave's scarlet display taunted. Point one more hour until he could flee the fluorescent-lit purgatory of the Crenshaw McDonald's. Practically spitting distance from the soaring, futuristic SpaceX complex, he swiped at the already gleaming countertop, the pointless repetition a flimsy shield against the encroaching fatigue. Textbooks were weighty, but the mountain of his student loan debt pressed even harder. Each burger flipped, each fry salted, felt like another grain in a sandstorm burying his aspirations. He yearned to code, to conjure up a revolutionary app, a vision obscured by the grim reality of bargain bin noodles and relentless accrual of interest. A ping from his phone heralded another missive from the university's financial aid office. He ignored it, the familiar anxiety constricting his chest. Later, maybe, the whoosh of the automatic doors cleaved through the monotony. Jake straightened, forcing his lips into a welcoming curve. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you?" The newcomer was unexpected. Unlike the usual late-night caravan of long-haul drivers, bleary-eyed students, or the occasional bewildered tourist, this man looked like he'd wandered off the set of a derailed TED Talk. His dark hair was a mess of controlled chaos, his suit creased, and the etched lines around his eyes whispered tales of sleepless stretches and unyielding pressure. He was, quite simply, wrecked. Recognition dawned slowly, a delayed fuse epiphany. Elon Musk, the visionary, pursuing Martian colonization and electric vehicle dominance, stood before him, radiating exhaustion. Jake's brain stalled for a heartbeat, his practiced customer service spiel dissolving in his static. He fumbled with his headset, narrowly averting a collision with the floor. Musk approached, his gaze drifting over the menu board with a detached air. "Just coffee, black, large." His voice was a low, gravelly rumble. Coming right up, Jake blurted, heat rising in his cheeks. He pivoted to the coffee machine, his fingers suddenly betraying him. That he poured, meticulously avoiding spills, and secured the lid. Turning back, he noticed Musk still fixed on the menu, a fleeting shadow. Was it sorrow? Flickering in his eyes, that a sudden, impulsive notion seized Jake. Foolhardy, illogical, he knew he shouldn't. Ms. Perkins, his manager, would unleash a torrent of disapproval. But the man looked like he needed something beyond caffeine's jolt. "Sir," Jake began, his voice a mere breath. "It's on me. The coffee, and anything else. Burger, fries, whatever you want at MY Treat." Musk blinked, his gaze sharp, locking onto Jake. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the hum of the fryers. Jake steeled himself, anticipating a curt refusal, perhaps even a complaint lodged. Instead, a ghost of a smile played on Musk's lips. That a weary smile, a world-worn smile, but undeniably a smile. "You don't need to do that," he murmured. "I know," Jake countered, his pulse hammering against his ribs. "But you look like you could use it." He couldn't articulate his motivations. Perhaps it was the proximity to SpaceX, that constant reminder of grand ambition. Perhaps the raw fatigue etched onto Musk's face. Or maybe just a primal urge to commit an act, any act, of pure, unadulterated kindness. Musk scrutinized him, his gaze intense, almost unnerving. Jake squirmed, feeling exposed under that focused scrutiny. He pictured Miss Perkins' withering glare, her reprimands ringing in his ears. "All right." Musk relented, his voice barely audible. "All right, thank you." He hesitated, then added, "A quarter-pounder with cheese and large fries." Relief washed over Jake in a tidal wave. He punched in the order with practiced speed, his fingers dancing across the keys. He ignored the sirens blaring in his head, the voice of reason screaming for him to desist. He was in too deep now. He assembled the order with practiced grace, his movements precise despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. He presented Musk with the bag, the inviting scent of golden potatoes wafting from within. "Here you go, sir," Jake offered, his voice regaining composure. "Enjoy." Musk accepted the bag, meeting Jake's gaze. "Thank you," he repeated, sincerity lacing his tone. "Really, this means a lot more than you realize." He turned and made his way to a vacant table, the bag held securely. Jake watched, a volatile mix of exhilaration and trepidation churning within him. He'd just comped Elon Musk a meal. What had he unleashed? He glanced towards the staff area, half expecting Ms. Perkins to materialize, her features twisted into a mask of outrage. But she remained absent. He exhaled a shaky breath, striving to quell his racing heart. Musk sat alone, meticulously unwrapping the quarter-pounder. He took a bite, his eyes briefly closing as if savoring the simple indulgence. Jake faced the counter once more, feigning nonchalance. He wiped it down yet again, his thoughts spiraling. He was likely on the precipice of unemployment. His already fragile finances would collapse, and his coding aspirations would recede further into the realm of dreams. But then he glanced back at Musk. The man was still eating, a subtle, almost invisible smile gracing his features. And for a fleeting, precious moment, Jake felt a swell of gratification. He had, in his own insignificant way, made a positive impact. He had offered a fleeting respite, a minor act of grace, to someone who profoundly needed it. He checked the clock, still another hour to endure. But somehow, the remaining time felt less daunting. He straightened his shoulders, inhaled deeply, and steeled himself for whatever consequences awaited. The ripples of his actions had begun to spread, their ultimate destination unknown. Policy violation. Brenda Perkins, perched near the milkshake dispenser, ostensibly auditing stock, but really monitoring her lunch crowd, witnessed the entire episode unfold, a slow-motion train wreck. Young Jake, bless his heart but curse his naivete, was handing off a perfectly good quarter-pounder combo to someone that figured disheveled, weary, vaguely recognizable, but undeniably not on the payroll. The McDonald's fluorescence seemed to buzz with extra intensity as Brenda advanced toward register 3, her orthopedic shoes emitting small squeaks on the freshly scrubbed floor. Jake, back at his station, was scrubbing the counter with manic energy, eyes averted. Rodriguez, Brenda uttered, her voice a controlled simmer. Jake visibly recoiled. Ms. Perkins, is everything all right? The grin he offered didn't quite meet the fear in his eyes. All right is precisely what everything is not at MY office, post-haste. He'd anticipated the summons. From the instant the meal left his hands, a quicksilver surge of altruism had transmuted into a leaden weight of apprehension. He mumbled an apology to Maria, who offered a knowing eye roll, and trailed Brenda's ramrod straight back toward the cramped, airless sanctum of management. The office air hung stale, redolent with the ghosts of old coffee and dashed hopes. Brenda shut the door with a decisive click that reverberated in the confined space. An offer of a chair was forthcoming. Care to enlighten me, Rodriguez? She inquired, arms crossed tightly, her Brenda, manager name tag listing slightly, now seeming more like Brenda, inquisitor. Jake swallowed hard. Saw that man. He looked completely spent, like he hadn't slept in days, and he was broke. I had to do something. Brenda remained unmoved. Good intentions don't settle invoices, Rodriguez, and they certainly don't excuse circumventing company policy. But Ms. Perkins, Section 7.2, subsection C, unequivocally states that food is exchanged only for valid currency or approved vouchers. You bypass protocol. You gifted company assets. That constitutes pilfering. The word dropped into the silence, a cinder block of accusation. Pilfering. He'd never stolen a thing in his life. Once, finding a 20 in the parking lot, he'd turned it in. Now a thief, all for a fleeting spark of compassion. Idiocy. I wasn't trying to steal, Jake protested, his voice edging upwards. I just wanted to do something decent. Decency doesn't enter into it, Jake. Rules are paramount that we can't just dole out free food to anyone who looks spent. Where would it end? Everyone would be looking for a freebie. Her finger jabbed in his direction. Do you think McDonald's is a soup kitchen? He knew her reasoning, the inherent need to turn a profit, that rules are a bulwark against pandemonium. But logic did nothing to soothe the gnawing unease in his stomach. I offered to cover the cost, Jake blurted, the words a dam break. After he ate, I was going to use my own money. Brenda's impassive facade cracked, surprise fleeting across her features. You were going to pay afterwards? Yes, and I know it wasn't the smartest decision, but I wasn't thinking clearly that I just acted. A sigh escaped her, a puff of air that seemed to shrink her. She lowered herself into the creaking office chair, the springs protesting. Jake, you're a good worker, that I notice your diligence, that you're punctual, you're courteous, you're dependable. But you must realize I can't simply condone this. To do so would set a terrible precedent. He had no rejoinder. He just stood there, diminishing under her assessment. The scent of stale coffee gained potency, oppressive. He saw the balance in his checking account, the specter of the rent deadline, the treadmill of minimum wage, and barely scraping by. And now this. What will happen? He asked, barely audible. Brenda massaged her temples, her gaze weary. I must issue a written warning, that a formal reprimand. Another incident, and, well, you understand. He understood too well. He'd seen others dismissed for tardiness, excessive sick days, an accidental deluge of fry oil. The system was merciless. I understand, he mumbled, the words coating his tongue like ash. Brenda retrieved a form from a teetering stack on her desk. The employee disciplinary action form. He watched her fill out, the pen carving marks in the paper, each stroke a nail hammered into the coffin of his employment. I'm marking this as unauthorized disbursement of company resources, she specified, not lifting her eyes. I'm also deducting 1 hour's wages to offset the cost of the food. 1 hour's pay. Almost enough to cover a bus pass. He wanted to argue, to beg, to re-explain his intentions. That was merely a lapse, a moment of misdirected kindness. But words failed him. He simply nodded, accepting his fate. Brenda finished and slid the form across the desk. Sign here. He accepted the pen, his hand betraying a slight tremor, and scrawled his name at the bottom. Jake Rodriguez, admonished. I expect this will not recur, Rodriguez, Brenda said, finally meeting his gaze. A flicker of something resided there, a hint of empathy, recognition. He couldn't decipher it. No, thought Perkins, that IT won't. He turned and retreated from the office, the weight of the citation settling heavily on him. As he made his way back to his station, Maria caught his eye. She offered a small, sympathetic smile. He offered a weak one in return. Back at the register, the customers' faces dissolved into an amorphous blur. Orders hollered, fries sizzling, milkshakes blending. The familiar cadence of McDonald's was a steady, unforgiving beat. Underscoring his own smallness, he rang up an order for a Big Mac and a Coke. His fingers gliding numbly across the keys, he imagined the man he'd fed, somewhere, perhaps still in the parking lot, biting into the burger, finding a moment of solace amid whatever tribulations pursued him. Had it been worth the cost? He had no answer. Truly, his actions had been impulsive, spurred by a fleeting moment of compassion. Now, that impulse had cost him an hour's wages, and a formal warning that IT had further jeopardized his precarious financial standing. He should have stayed quiet. He should have abided by the rules. He should have kept to himself. As the next customer approached, Jake pasted on a smile and intoned, "Welcome to McDonald's. May I help you?" But inwardly, a different question echoed. What in the world have I done? Fired. The harsh glare of the Golden Arches kitchen assaulted Jake's eyes. Stainless steel gleamed under the unforgiving fluorescent lights, each surface reflecting the morning's bleakness. He struggled to focus on assembling McMuffins, his fingers thick and uncooperative. Yesterday's encounter with Brenda Perkins and the homeless man, Elon Musk, it turned out, haunted him. The written reprimand stung far worse than he'd expected. A scarlet letter branded on his soul. He'd reached out in kindness. And the reward was punishment. A sharp voice sliced through the breakfast rush cacophony. Jake office now. Brenda Perkins, an imposing presence even in her cramped domain, awaited. Her lips formed a tight, bloodless line, and her gaze held a chill that knotted Jake's gut. Take a seat, she commanded, her tone devoid of warmth. He sank into the unforgiving plastic chair, bracing himself for another lecture on corporate dogma. He raked a hand through his hair, the familiar tendrils of anxiety tightening around his throat. "Jake," Brenda began, shuffling papers with undue force. "Yesterday's incident represented a severe breach. That we've been over this." "Yes, ma'am," Jake mumbled, avoiding her flinty stare. And frankly, she amplified a rising edge in her voice. It showcased a profound disrespect for company assets, a flagrant disregard for established procedure. This McDonald's cannot function if employees are unilaterally redistributing product. Jake began an apology, attempting to articulate his motives, but she bulldozed over him. "Furthermore," she continued, her voice now glacial, "corporate has been apprised. Due to your probationary period, only one recourse remains." The ensuing silence was a thick, suffocating blanket. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew what loomed, but the impending doom was no less crushing. "Jake," Brenda stated, finally fixing him with a gaze as hard as diamonds, "your employment is terminated, effective immediately." The words echoed, concrete and absolute. The buzzing lights amplified the tension, and the aroma of frying grease curdled in his stomach. A wave of giddiness threatened to send him reeling. He swallowed hard, fighting to find his voice. "Terminated," he squeaked. "But I need this job." Brenda's expression never faltered. "I understand, Jake, but my hands are bound." The decision came from above. She slid his final check and a small cardboard box across the desk. "Gather your belongings." Jake stared at the box, his mind whirling. Dismissed. Over a quarter-pounder. The sheer absurdity threatened to overwhelm him. He yearned to argue, to plead his case, but words failed him. Numbness permeated his being. He rose, his legs shaky beneath him. He grasped the box, its weight disproportionate to its contents. The corridor to the locker room stretched into infinity. He felt the stares of his colleagues, their whispers a tangible presence trailing behind him. Maria, one of the cashiers, offered a hesitant look of pity. He averted his eyes, unable to meet her empathy. Shame washed over him, branding him as the failure, the charity case, the one unable to even hold down a fast food job. Inside the cramped locker room, he cleared his space with robotic motions. His worn work shoes, his stained apron, the cherished photograph of his abuela, each item felt tainted by the stench of his failure. He carefully tucked the photograph into his pocket, a tangible reminder of her enduring belief in him. Especially when his own wavered. As he exited the restaurant for the final time, the automatic door sealed behind him with an uncaring hiss. The intense sunlight felt abrasive against his eyes, and the city's noises, usually a vibrant clamor, seemed muted and distant. He began to walk, directionless, his thoughts a chaotic jumble of anger, despair, and trepidation. The route home unfolded as a depressing panorama of pawn shops, liquor stores, and condemned buildings. Each fissure in the sidewalk mirrored the disintegration of his aspirations. He envisioned the eviction notice glaring from his apartment door, the relentless hunger pangs, the shadow of disappointment darkening his mother's eyes. Rent loomed, bills piled up, an inescapable paper avalanche. How could he possibly manage now? The dream of returning to school, of earning a degree and forging a better future, felt further away than ever. A flickering candle in a rising gale. His phone vibrated. He snatched it, hoping for a lifeline. A word of encouragement, a text from his mom. "Mijo, get off early. Made your favorite, arroz con pollo." Jake stared at the message, his throat constricting. He couldn't reveal the truth. Not yet. He couldn't bear to witness her worry, to hear the undertones of heartbreak in her voice. He tapped out a hasty reply. "Yeah, Mom. Just running an errand. Be home soon." He shoved the phone back into his pocket and walked on, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the grimy pavement. The burden of his predicament was almost unbearable. He was alone, jobless, staring into an uncertain abyss. Rounding the corner onto his street, he noticed a familiar figure seated on a park bench. Immersed in a newspaper, IT was the homeless man, Elon Musk. Their eyes met, and Jake quickly glanced away, embarrassment burning his cheeks. He quickened his pace, desperate to vanish. "Hey you, the guy from McDonald's." Elon Musk called out. Jake hesitated, then reluctantly turned around. Avoidance was no longer possible. Elon Musk approached, curiosity etched on his face. "I wanted to express my gratitude," he said, extending his hand. "That burger meant more than you know." Jake stared at the offered hand, then awkwardly shook it. "It was nothing," he mumbled. "I just felt sorry." It felt like anything but nothing. Elon Musk countered, his eyes sparkling. It felt like an act of kindness, and that always means something. Jake remained silent, feeling exposed and uncomfortable. "So," Elon Musk continued, "what brings you out this way? You appear as though you've seen a ghost." Jake paused, then spilled his story. What did he have to lose? "I was fired," he confessed, barely audible, "for giving you that burger." Elon Musk's eyebrows shot skyward. "Fired? Seriously? That's not insane." Jake nodded, a sardonic twist to his lips. "Well, that's life, I suppose." Elon Musk fell silent, his expression thoughtful. Then he inquired, "Tell you what, I'm developing a new project, one poised to change the world. And I require someone with your inherent character. Someone who isn't afraid to bend the rules for what's just." Intrigued? Jake gaped, incredulous. Was this some elaborate jest? "You wish to employ me?" he stammered. Elon Musk grinned. "Let's just suggest I have a hunch you're precisely the type of person I need to SO. What's your answer? Are you in?" Jake scrutinized Elon Musk, then the dilapidated surroundings, then back at Elon Musk. A fragile spark of hope ignited within him, a beacon in the darkness. Perhaps this was a redemption. Perhaps losing his McDonald's gig was the most transformative event in his life, that he inhaled deeply and declared, "Yes, yes, I'm in." Going viral. The harsh glare of the McDonald's fluorescents seemed to amplify, a mocking drone after Ms. Perkins' curt dismissal. Jake robotically scooped his few possessions, a battered baseball cap, a well-worn copy of Cosmos, from his locker. The stares of his colleagues like needles pricking his skin, he avoided their pitying glances. Shame, a bitter pill lodged in his throat, a failure. Yet again, as he trudged toward the exit, a woman with vermilion hair and a constellation of piercings observed him. He remembered seeing her earlier, obsessively photographing her McFlurry. Their eyes met, and she offered a fleeting, sympathetic smile. He returned a feeble one before stepping into the unforgiving light of day. Unseen, she swiftly thumbed a message in her phone. At Reddit Rebel. "Just saw something awful at MCD's on Elm St. Manager. Can a young dude for sharing a burger with a homeless guy. Called it theft. He looked genuinely crushed. Where's the compassion? Hashtag McDonald's. Hashtag fire the manager. Hashtag kindness matters. Hashtag do better." The tweet, a lone voice in the digital wilderness, slowly gained traction. A retweet here, a comment there. Then a local blog picked up the story. The headline blared, "McDonald's employee sacked for helping the needy." Unaware, Jake dragged himself home. The burden of unemployment a lead weight on his shoulders. He unlocked the door to the cramped apartment. The familiar aroma of his mother's cooking, normally a balm, now only amplified his sense of worthlessness. "Jakey, home early," his mother's voice called from the kitchen. Tinged with worry, he mumbled a greeting, eyes averted. "Got canned." The crash of a dropped spoon punctuated the silence. "Canned? What happened?" He spilled the story, words tumbling out in a torrent of humiliation and frustration. His mother listened patiently, her face a canvas of sadness and understanding. When he was done, she embraced him tightly. Me, Joe," she murmured, stroking his hair. "You have a good heart. Don't let anyone steal that." His younger sister, Maria, rushed in, her face glowing from her phone. "Jake, you're going viral." He frowned, puzzled. "What are you talking about?" Maria shoved her phone in his face. The screen displayed a trending hashtag. Hashtag justice for Jake. He stared, dumbfounded. His story, a slightly skewed version, was plastered across the web. Comments flooded in. At Kindness Warrior. "This is an outrage. Boycott McDonald's." At Real News Hound. "Corporate greed at its worst. Shame on you, McDonald's." At Random Dude 77. "He broke the rules. He deserved it." The sheer volume of opinions, both supportive and critical, was staggering. He scrolled, a cocktail of disbelief and apprehension churning within him. Some hailed him as a hero, others labeled him a thief, that he was neither. Just Jake, a guy who'd made a questionable choice. Then he saw it, a verified account. At Elon Musk, just heard about this. Absurd. Contact me that I have an opportunity for you, seriously. His jaw went slack. Elon Musk? Offering a job. It had to be a hoax. He tapped the account. Blue check mark. Thousands of posts. This was real. He showed his mother and sister. Maria squealed, jumping for joy. His mother, however, remained cautious. Mijo, be careful. These things aren't always as they appear. He knew she was right. But a glimmer of hope flickered within him, a tiny ember in the darkness of his predicament. The next hours became a blur. News outlets called incessantly, clamoring for interviews. Twitter exploded with updates, speculation, and memes that he felt adrift in a surreal landscape. He ignored most of the inquiries. Overwhelmed and unsure how to respond, he did, however, cautiously send a DM to Elon Musk's verified account. At Jake Rodriguez. Mr. Musk, this is Jake Rodriguez that I saw your tweet that I'm speechless. Thank you. The reply arrived almost instantaneously. At Elon Musk, call me. Phone number. He hesitated, his pulse racing. Could this be happening? He inhaled deeply and punched in the number that a brisk professional voice answered. Elon Musk's office. Who is this? He swallowed hard. This is Jake Rodriguez that Mr. Musk tweeted about me. After a brief pause, the voice continued, 1 moment, please. The line went silent. Humming with anticipation, he could hear his mother and sister whispering nervously in the background. Then, a familiar voice, slightly digitized, resonated in his ear. Jake? Elon here. Glad you connected. Jake felt a wave of giddiness wash over him. Mr. Musk, I don't understand. No need for understanding, Jake. Just listen to I admire your actions. The world needs more compassion, and I need people with integrity on my team. Your team? What team? Musk chuckled. Let's just say it's a venture with the potential to reshape the future. I'll fill you in on the details. Can you fly out to California tomorrow? California? He never ventured beyond the neighboring town. I don't know, Mr. Musk. I don't have funds for a ticket. Don't concern yourself with that. That will handle all arrangements. Just pack a bag. And Jake? Yes, Mr. Musk. Don't let anyone convince you that doing what's right is wrong. The call ended. He stood there, phone still gripped tightly, staring vacantly at the wall. His mother and sister bombarded him with questions. What did he say? What's happening? He couldn't fully grasp it. He was just a kid who'd been fired from McDonald's. Now, Elon Musk was offering him a position, a chance to impact the world. Meanwhile, back at McDonald's, Ms. Perkins faced a different kind of tempest. The restaurant's phone lines were tied up with angry callers. Corporate brass was breathing down her neck. Her district manager was en route for a discussion. The tweet had not merely gone viral. It had ignited a full-scale public relations disaster. McDonald's corporate PR squad was scrambling to manage the fallout. They released a statement, carefully crafted and devoid of genuine remorse, claiming they were investigating the matter. But the internet remained unconvinced. The hashtag #JusticeForJake continued its ascent, fueled by indignation and a demand for accountability. Even late-night comedians were riffing on the situation. Ms. Perkins watched the news reports unfold on the break room television, her face ashen. She knew her job hung by a thread. She had followed protocol, hadn't she? Enforced the rules. But something about the look in Jake's eyes, the raw disappointment, lingered. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had erred profoundly. Crowdfunding hope. Jake stared at the blank GoFundMe page, the cursor blinking mockingly. Help Jake get back on his feet. He typed as the title. Cliched, maybe, but honest, he erased it. Kindness costs, but shouldn't. Better. God, he was terrible at this that he felt like he was begging, even though his intentions were pure, to bridge the gap until he figured out what working for Elon Musk even meant. He took a deep breath and started again. He recounted the story, keeping it factual, devoid of unnecessary embellishment. He explained about offering the Big Mac to the homeless man, the subsequent firing by Ms. Perkins, the viral tweet that he mentioned the job offer, but downplayed it, framing it as a potential opportunity rather than a done deal. He didn't want people to donate based on the promise of future riches. He wanted them to understand he was struggling now. "I'm not asking for a handout," he wrote, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I just need a little help to cover rent and bills while I navigate this unexpected situation. Anything you can contribute, no matter how small, would be greatly appreciated. And if you can't donate, sharing this campaign would mean the world to me." He set the goal at $3,000, enough for 2 months' rent and utilities. That it felt like an astronomical sum. He added a photo, a slightly blurry selfie taken last summer at Coney Island, a rare picture where he actually looked happy. That he clicked publish. Then he waited. The first few hours were agonizing. He refreshed the page every few minutes, watching the donation counter stubbornly remain at 0. Doubt not at him. Maybe he was being delusional. Maybe people saw him as just another entitled millennial looking for a quick buck. He considered taking the page down, burying his shame. Then a notification, $10 from Anonymous. Then another, $5 from Sarah M. A trickle became a stream that he watched, mesmerized as the numbers climbed. $50, $100, $250. That within a few hours, he had surpassed $500. He started reading the comments. "Saw your story on Twitter. So sorry this happened to you. Kindness matters. Keep your head up, Jake. The world needs more people like you. Donated what I could. Pay it forward when you can." He felt a lump forming in his throat. He hadn't realized how much he needed this. Not just the money, but the validation. The knowledge that strangers, people who knew nothing about him, believe in him. It was a bomb on the stinging humiliation of being fired, the gnawing fear of being broke. The next day, the campaign exploded. His story had been picked up by a few smaller news outlets, and the GoFundMe link was spreading like wildfire. He woke up to a barrage of notifications. Donations were pouring in from all over the world, from Australia, from Germany, from Brazil. The counter was spinning so fast he could barely keep up. That he sat on the edge of his bed, his laptop perched precariously on his knees, tears welling in his eyes. The goal had been reached and then surpassed. That he was now at $5,000, then $7,000, then $10,000. He couldn't believe it. He scrolled through the comments, each one a tiny beacon of hope. Some were funny, some were heartfelt, some were simply a single word: kindness. He saw donations from people who had clearly struggled themselves, small amounts, accompanied by messages of solidarity. He saw donations from CEOs and celebrities, larger amounts, accompanied by messages of encouragement. One comment stood out, from one former McDonald's employee to another: "Wishing you all the best. Don't let anyone dim your light." It was signed Michael J. Jake spent the entire day responding to messages, typing thank you notes, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of kindness, struggling to stay afloat. That he knew he couldn't keep all the money. That it felt wrong. That he decided to donate a portion to a local homeless shelter. He also wanted to start a small fund to help other people who had been unfairly dismissed from their jobs for acts of compassion. He had a vision of a world where kindness wasn't punished, but rewarded. That evening, he received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello, Jake? This is Sarah from GoFundMe." His heart skipped a beat. Had he done something wrong? Was the campaign being shut down? "Hi, Sarah," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to reach out and congratulate you on the incredible success of your campaign," Sarah said. "It's one of the most inspiring stories we've seen in a while. Your compassion has truly resonated with people." "Thank you," Jake said, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "We'd love to feature your story on our website," Sarah continued. "We think it could inspire even more people to give back to their communities." Jake agreed, feeling a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this whole crazy situation was happening for a reason. Maybe he could turn this negative experience into something positive, something meaningful. Later that night, after he'd finished responding to the last of the comments and made a preliminary list of organizations to donate to, he looked at the GoFundMe page one last time. The total was now over $15,000. He couldn't believe it. He closed his laptop and walked over to the window. The city. Lights twinkled below, A vast expanse of interconnected lives that he felt a sense of connection to those lives, a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in a long time. He thought about Ms. Perkins. He wondered how she was doing. He didn't harbor any resentment towards her. He understood that she was just doing her job, following the rules. He hoped that she wasn't suffering too much from the backlash. He even considered reaching out to her, offering her some of the money. He knew that forgiveness was a powerful thing, and he knew that kindness, like a pebble dropped into a pond, could create ripples that extended far beyond what anyone could imagine. He saw his reflection in the glass, a tired but determined face that he had no idea what the future held. But he knew one thing for sure. He would never stop being kind. The anonymous donation. Jake's gaze was glued to the screen, the numbers swimming before his eyes. That he blinked, scrubbed at his vision with his knuckles, then refocused. The GoFundMe, already a beacon of generosity at over 20 grand, now boasted $1,020, $347. A choked sound escaped him. He recoiled in his chair, the cheap plastic creaking under the sudden shift. $1 million. It felt unreal, a glitch in the matrix. Surely, he was misreading the digital display. A stray keystroke, adding an impossible zero. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm as he scrolled to the recent donations. There, a single entry blazed like a rogue comet among the smaller contributions. Anonymous, $1,000,000.1 million. He shot to his feet, pacing the confines of his cramped apartment like a caged animal. The chill of the linoleum seeped into his bare feet. A futile attempt to ground him, he raked a hand through his already unruly hair, a gesture of bewildered frustration. Who possessed such largesse, such a willingness to simply give it away? Especially to him, a recent casualty of the fast food industry. His mind spiraled, a vortex of implausible theories. Could GoFundMe be orchestrating some elaborate PR stunt? Doubtful that a bored celebrity seeking a philanthropic tax break? A remote possibility. He pictured Leonardo DiCaprio, a champion of environmental causes, secretly backing the underdog. A stretch, to say the least. Suddenly, an image surfaced, a certain tech mogul, known for his turtlenecks and interplanetary ambitions. Elon. Could it be? Could Elon Musk, wrestling with some obscure guilt or obligation, have made this colossal, anonymous donation? The thought sent a jolt through him that IT was the only explanation that even approached logic, given the bizarre sequence of events. After all, it was Musk's impromptu McDonald's visit that had ignited this entire conflagration. He dismissed it almost as quickly as it arose. That IT was preposterous. Why the anonymity? Why not a direct job offer, a public endorsement? It clashed with the flamboyant persona he projected, the meme lord, the space race provocateur. But what if he sought to evade the spotlight? What if he wished to help discreetly, avoiding further media bombardment? Jake collapsed back in his chair, the weight of the possibility crushing him. Musk or not, the reality remained. $1 million awaited him. Or rather, it would, once GoFundMe claimed their share. Still an unfathomable fortune for someone who, only weeks ago, fretted over rent. He closed his eyes, attempting to reconcile himself to the sheer scale of it all. That $1 million transcended mere bill payments or a shiny new vehicle. IT represented opportunity, security, liberation. He could finally dedicate himself to his coding aspirations. Unshackled from the constant dread of financial collapse, he could invest in his future, enroll in online courses, craft a compelling portfolio. He could even launch his own venture, develop his innovative app, perhaps even reshape the world. The prospect was both electrifying and daunting to Jake Rodriguez, a kid from Queens without a college degree, now held the potential to enact real change. But what if he faltered? What if he frittered away this extraordinary gift? The pressure was a palpable force, threatening to suffocate him. He opened his eyes, riveted by the radiant screen. He navigated back to the anonymous donation, scrutinizing the timestamp. IT had occurred a few hours prior. In the dead of night, he envisioned a solitary figure, somewhere out there, altering the course of his life with a single click. He felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude, so intense it welled tears in his eyes. Gratitude for the kindness of strangers, for the capricious nature of fate, for the unexpected second chance he had received. He had a solemn obligation to reciprocate. He couldn't simply sequester this wealth. Indulging in personal whims, he had to leverage it to create a positive impact, to assist others in distress, to propagate the very generosity he had experienced. His thoughts drifted to Ms. Perkins, the manager who had terminated his employment. He had harbored such anger, such resentment. But now, confronted with the absurd shimmering before him, he felt a stirring of empathy. She was merely executing her duties, adhering to the rules. She likely regretted her decision, especially given the ensuing media circus. Perhaps he could extend a helping hand to her as well, not through direct monetary gifts, which might exacerbate the situation, but perhaps he could harness his newfound platform to advocate for improved working conditions for those in the fast food sector, to champion fair wages and adequate benefits. That he understood it would be an uphill battle, that he was merely one individual, armed solely with a GoFundMe account and a viral narrative. But he now possessed $1 million and a profound responsibility to steward it wisely. He reached for his laptop, his fingers hovering above the keys. He had a monumental task ahead. First, he needed to consult a financial advisor. He was utterly unprepared to manage such a substantial sum. He needed a trustworthy guide, someone impervious to the allure of exploitation. Then, he needed to begin exploring coding courses. That he was eager to resume his studies as soon as possible, that he couldn't afford to squander any more time. And finally, he needed to compose an update for his GoFundMe page, expressing his heartfelt appreciation for the unwavering support and outlining his vision for the future. He wanted to be forthright, to transparently communicate his intentions for the funds. He inhaled deeply, the air filling his lungs with a revitalized sense of purpose. He was still Jake Rodriguez, the McDonald's employee who lost his job for offering a complimentary burger. But he was also something more now, that he was an emblem of hope, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, a living embodiment of the ripple effect. And he was determined not to disappoint. A sustainable dream. $1 million, the magnitude of that sum pressed down on Jake, not as a weight, but as kinetic energy waiting to be unleashed. After the initial disbelief and the frantic confirmation calls, a sense of mission took root. This couldn't be frittered away. IT demanded action beyond merely erasing his student debt, though that was certainly on the agenda. It compelled him to create that sleep proved elusive that night. The usual worries about overdue bills gave way to a maelstrom of ideas, swirling together like ingredients in a bizarre experiment. Coding academies, a state-of-the-art workstation, launching that long-deferred online venture. The sheer array of possibilities felt limitless, strangely immobilizing to some ungodly hour. Somewhere between lukewarm coffee and sheer nervous drive, Jake stumbled upon an expose regarding the ecological footprint of food delivery. The dizzying quantity of disposable plastics, the emissions from delivery vehicles clogging city streets, the sheer tons of discarded edibles. The article depicted a disheartening reality, a reality that struck a chord. He recalled countless instances of perfectly edible food being discarded at McDonald's, deemed unsaleable by the clock or a fickle customer whim. That squandering stung, but he also reflected on his own delivery habit, the ease of ordering obscuring and nagging truth. He was part of the problem. An idea began to gestate. What if there existed a delivery service engineered for ecological responsibility? One that curtailed waste, utilized earth-friendly packaging, and championed local, ethical purveyors? The thought crackled with potential. That he spent the waning hours of the night immersed in research. He devoured reports on compostable materials, electric vehicle options, and cutting-edge strategies for minimizing refuse. He explored composting initiatives, partnerships with nearby farms, and the burgeoning consumer demand for greener choices. DIY dawn. The initial flicker had erupted into a fervent dedication. This transcended mere profit. It was about effecting change, about forging a business that resonated with his core principles, an enterprise that he could genuinely champion. The subsequent days dissolved into a flurry of feverish activity. Jake converted his shoebox apartment into a makeshift command center, plastering every available surface with scribbled notes, flowcharts, and inspirational slogans. He investigated potential competitors, scrutinized market dynamics, and drafted a rudimentary business blueprint on a second-hand whiteboard. His initial concept was daring. Even bordering on the absurd, he envisioned a network of electric bicycles delivering meals in reusable containers, all sourced from regional farms and restaurants dedicated to sustainable practices, zero tolerance for waste kitchen, where food scraps will be composted and used to cultivate herbs for their offerings, an app that documented the eco-impact of each order, allowing consumers to witness the positive ramifications of their choices. He understood the path ahead wouldn't be straightforward. The sustainable food sector remained nascent, fraught with obstacles. Acquiring compostable packaging materials was costly. Establishing a reliable electric cycle fleet demanded substantial capital. Persuading local eateries to embrace environmentally sound practices would be an uphill struggle. However, the prospective rewards were significant, not solely in financial terms, but in the gratification of constructing a business that benefited both the planet and its inhabitants. He started pragmatically, prioritizing the core aspects of his venture. First, a name. After an extended brainstorming session fueled by a thesaurus and multiple caffeine infusions, he landed on Evergreen Eats. It was succinct, evocative, and conveyed the essence of his vision. Next, a visual identity. Hours melted away as he experimented with graphic design programs, ultimately crafting a symbolic rendering of a seedling emerging from fertile earth. Imperfect, yet promising, that he then embarked on outreach to local farmers and restaurant owners, outlining his business plan and gauging their interest. Responses varied widely. Some were immediately receptive, eager to collaborate with an ecologically minded delivery service. Others remained hesitant, voicing concerns about increased expenses and logistical complications. One of the most promising prospects materialized from a diminutive, family-run establishment named the Green Sprout Bistro, renowned for its organic and locally sourced ingredients. The proprietor, Maria, a woman brimming with passion, instantly embraced Jake's concept. "I've longed to offer delivery," she confessed over a cup of herbal infusion, "but I couldn't identify a service that aligned with my values. Everything prioritized speed and convenience over environmental responsibility." Maria volunteered to be Evergreen Eats' inaugural partner, contributing a diverse menu of wholesome and delectable options. She even offered Jake access to her kitchen during non-peak hours to concoct several of his own original creations. Jake felt a wave of appreciation wash over him. Maria's endorsement provided a much-needed shot in the arm, a validation of his idea's viability. The technological elements presented a greater challenge. Jake's coding proficiency had grown stale, and creating a polished and user-intuitive app proved to be a formidable endeavor. He contemplated engaging a freelance programmer, but the associated costs were prohibitive. He remembered the coding boot camp he considered attending. Now seemed like the optimal moment to cultivate his skill set, to acquire the tools necessary to build his own application. That he enrolled in an intense online coding program, dedicating every spare moment to mastering the intricacies of JavaScript and React Native. The learning curve was precipitous, yet Jake was resolute in his determination to acquire the expertise required to realize his vision. The days dissolved into weeks, a relentless cycle of research, planning, coding, and countless cups of coffee. Jake felt drained, yet simultaneously invigorated. He was finally chasing his dream, building an enterprise from the foundation up, something that truly mattered. One evening, while immersed in app development, he received an SMS message from an unfamiliar sender. "Enjoying the million. Hope you put it to good use." Jake's pulse quickened. It was him. Elon paused, momentarily paralyzed, then tapped out a response. "Thank you. More than you can imagine that I'm launching a sustainable food delivery service, Evergreen Eats." Moments later, a single word illuminated his screen. "Impressive." Jake smiled. Minimalist, but sufficient. He still faced a long journey, But he was on the right path. He possessed a dream, a strategy, and the resources to enact it. And he held the unshakable conviction that he could make a difference, one earth-conscious meal at a time. The reverberations of a simple act of generosity had unleashed a cascade of opportunity, and Jake was resolved to ride it all the way to the shores of success. Finding a mentor. The harsh glow of overhead fixtures in the community center bleached the room, reflecting off the utilitarian furniture arranged in neat rows. Jake fidgeted, the rasp of his cheap plastic chair a grating soundtrack to his apprehension. Driven by a sudden brainstorm and the creeping realization he might be lost, he'd impulsively signed up for the "So You Want to Be an Entrepreneur?" workshop. The attendees were a motley crew, an over-caffeinated recent graduate practically vibrating with anticipation, a retiree seeking purpose beyond balance sheets, and then Jake, the ex-coder with a revolutionary idea and a desperate craving for direction. The presenter, a woman whose power suit mirrored the intensity of her voice, lectured on market dynamics and return on investment. Jake strained to absorb the information, scribbling furiously in a fresh notebook purchased with his severance that he quickly felt swamped. ROI. Market dynamics? He was far more adept at debugging algorithms than deciphering profit margins. During the break, he drifted towards the tepid coffee urn, acutely aware of feeling out of place. He'd envisioned himself confidently outlining evergreen eats, but the reality was a chaotic swirl of anxieties. Sourcing responsible packaging, navigating labyrinthine food regulations, the challenges felt mountainous. Quite the gathering, wouldn't you say? A gentle voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to face an older woman, her eyes crinkling with warmth as she offered a kind smile. She wore a simple, yet graceful, linen dress and a delicate silver pendant. Her hair, a cascade of spun moonlight, was neatly coiled at her nape. "Yeah, a lot of drive," Jake stammered, heat rising in his cheeks. "Drive is a powerful force," she replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "What sparked yours?" He hesitated, then confessed, I have an idea for a business, but I'm floundering." She arched a brow, not with judgment, but genuine curiosity. "Indeed, I'm listening." He inhaled deeply and plunged into his pitch, the words tumbling out in a rush, his passion battling his insecurities. He described Evergreen Eats, the sustainable food delivery initiative, his commitment to partnering with local purveyors of ethically grown ingredients, and his dedication to ecologically sound packaging. He mentioned the GoFundMe, Elon's acknowledgement, and his profound yearning to effect real change. As he spoke, the woman listened with unwavering focus, a subtle smile gracing her lips, and no interruptions, no easy answers, no hollow reassurances, just attentive listening. Finally, his momentum waned, his voice fading. He steeled himself for the inevitable interrogation, the well-intentioned, or less so, criticism. Instead, she said softly, "That's extraordinary, Jake. Truly extraordinary." He stared at her, surprised. "You really think so?" "I do. Ambitious, certainly, but also vital. The world needs enterprises with a soul. And your story, quite remarkable, actually." "Thanks," he mumbled, a tiny ember of hope flickering within him. "But I'm just a coder, that I'm clueless about business." "That's where I might be of assistance," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Anna Moretti, and I believe I can guide you." He clasped her hand, surprised by her firm grip. "Guide me? How?" "I've navigated the business landscape for decades. Launched a company from the ground up, scaled it, sold it. That I've stumbled, learned, and hopefully gleaned a bit of wisdom along the way that I've been seeking a way to contribute, and mentoring someone with a clear vision and purpose feels like the perfect fit." Jake's spirit soared. You'd mentor me? If you'll have me, that I see something special in you." Jake, in authentic fervor and a kind heart. Those are paramount for success. He was nearly speechless. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she countered, her eyes sparkling. "Let's meet for coffee next week. That we can discuss your plans, your hurdles, and how I can best support you." He didn't waver. "Yes, absolutely yes." They traded contact information, And as Jake returned to his seat, the overhead lights seemed less glaring, the atmosphere less oppressive. He had a mentor, someone who believed in him, someone to navigate the treacherous currents of entrepreneurship. During the following days, Jake labored relentlessly on the Evergreen Eats application. Energized by Anna's encouragement and the anticipation of their meeting, that he devoured online resources concerning sustainable food practices, investigated conscious packaging alternatives, and even started experimenting with plant-based creations in his cramped kitchen. When he encountered Anna at a cozy, independent coffee house, he came prepared with a journal brimming with ideas, questions, and anxieties. The rich scent of freshly roasted beans hung in the air, a welcome contrast to the sterile atmosphere of the community center. Anna listened with patience as he detailed his vision, his challenges, and his anxieties. She asked incisive questions, challenging him to critically assess his business model, his target demographic, and his long-term objectives. "Your dedication is commendable, Jake," she observed after he'd finished, swirling her latte. "However, passion alone is insufficient. You require a comprehensive blueprint. You must grasp your expenses, your revenue streams, and your competitive landscape." She didn't mince words. She highlighted potential hazards, questioned his assumptions, and compelled him to confront the unvarnished realities of running a business. Yet, she did it with empathy, with forbearance, and with a genuine desire for his triumph. "Let's delve into marketing," she suggested, her gaze sharpening slightly. "How do you intend to connect with your target demographic? Who are they? What are their wants? What will they spend?" Jay conceded that marketing had been an afterthought, that he'd been preoccupied with the app and ethical sourcing, neglecting the essential step of acquiring clients. "That's all right," Anna said, offering a reassuring smile. "We'll address it together. Marketing is about narrative, that it's about establishing a connection with your audience on an emotional level. You have a compelling story, Jake. The Evergreen Eats tale is one of reinvention, of second chances, and of making a positive difference in the world. You must convey that narrative." She devoted the next hour to brainstorming marketing strategies, proposing everything from social media initiatives to alliances with local environmental groups. She emphasized the significance of authenticity, of transparency, and of remaining true to his principles. As their meeting neared its end, Anna laid her hand gently on his arm. "I recognize that this is a daunting undertaking, Jake, but you are not isolated. I am here to support you at every stage. And remember, even the most accomplished entrepreneurs encounter setbacks. The secret lies in learning from your mistakes, in unwavering perseverance, and in steadfast allegiance to your vision." Departing the coffee house, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose, that he still had a considerable distance to travel. But he was no longer adrift, that he had a mentor, a guide, and a friend. And he had a growing conviction that Evergreen Eats was more than just an enterprise. It was a calling, that it was a chance to reciprocate the kindness he'd been shown, to make a meaningful impact on the world, and to demonstrate that even a dismissed programmer could revolutionize the world, one sustainable meal a day. Ms. Perkins drifted slowly down the store aisles, her eyes diligently searching for reduced-price bread. The bright lights above seemed to magnify the ceaseless inner murmur of anxiety. Regret gnawed at her. She knew she had erred in dismissing Jake. He was a decent young man, and his act of generosity, however misdirected it seemed at the time, had exposed her own inflexible adherence to protocol. She had seen the news, read about Evergreen Eats, and felt a twinge of something she hadn't experienced in years: remorse. She paused before a display of organic apples, their gleaming skins radiating under the artificial light. A modest sign indicated their local origin. She remembered Jake speaking with passion about supporting regional growers, diminishing carbon footprints, and affecting positive change. That a nascent hope flickered within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, wasn't too late to atone. Maybe she could discern a means to bolster Evergreen Eats, to contribute to Jake's vision. The notion offered a measure of solace, a faint glimmer in the shadows of her regret. She had much to learn, and it was possible, just possible, that Jake could be the one to show her. The business plan takes shape. Jake unfurled the blueprint-sized papers across Anna's glass desk, the recycled stock carrying a faint woodland scent. Anna, perched on her chair's edge, formed a steeple with her fingers, her gaze laser-focused. The city's iconic skyline shimmered beyond, a glittering challenge, a daily reminder of the heights Jake yearned to scale. "All right, Jake," Anna began, her tone sharp yet supportive. "Let's get into the Evergreen Eats proposal. The heart is there, the purpose is commendable, but the IT needs focus." Jake's throat constricted. He'd invested weeks, powered by cheap noodles and relentless caffeine, but he knew she was spot on. His initial zeal had swelled into a document thick with idealistic pronouncements, yet thin on actionable strategy. First, Anna tapped a page with a perfectly shaped nail. "Your market overview is expansive, targeting everyone who eats lacks precision, and we need to identify the individuals most receptive to a sustainable food delivery service. Consider demographics, lifestyle choices, core beliefs. Who will be your initial advocates?" Jake raked a hand through his eternally tousled hair. "I figured eco-conscious millennials, those who frequent farmers markets, perhaps." "Good. Begin there. Then, how do you intend to connect with them?" "Social media is a given, but what else? Strategic alliances with like-minded local businesses, community outreach. Dare to think creatively." The next 3 hours dissolved as they dissected every facet of the plan. Anna probed his premises, scrutinized his financial projections, and pressed for justification of every minute detail. She didn't mince words, but her critique was consistently constructive, always aimed at molding Evergreen Eats into a viable venture. "Your projected marketing budget appears optimistic," Anna remarked wryly, indicating a number that bordered on wishful thinking. "Realism is key. Let's brainstorm lean, impactful strategies, guerrilla tactics, influencer partnerships, perhaps even sponsoring a park beautification project." Jake scribbled intensely, his initial defensiveness yielding to Anna's practical guidance. He understood. She wasn't demolishing his dream. She was fortifying it, layer by careful layer. "The logistics seem ambitious," Anna pressed on, her brow arched. "Electric bikes are ecologically sound, but what about our city's hills? What's your contingency plan for inclement weather? And how will you monitor inventory to curtail waste?" Jake had pondered these points, but hadn't fully solidified the solutions. He mumbled something about real-time tracking and insulated containers. "A good beginning," Anna conceded. "But we need specifics. That we must demonstrate to potential backers that you've anticipated every conceivable roadblock." By the time they wrapped up, Jake's original plan resembled a war zone, littered with deleted phrases, emphasized passages, and margin notations in Anna's elegant penmanship. But it was also more robust, more targeted, more tangible. "Okay, Jake," Anna stated, leaning back, a rare smile illuminating her face. "This forms a solid base. Now, it's time to approach the bank." The prospect sparked a fresh wave of trepidation that he'd never sought alone. The bank, with its imposing facade and reverential quiet, felt like entering a predator's lair. The following days became a blur of refining the revised document, rehearsing his pitch, and desperately trying to convince himself he wouldn't appear foolish. Anna arranged a meeting with Mr. Henderson, a loan officer at Redwood Community Bank, known for championing local businesses. Standing before the bank on that day, Jake felt a cold trickle of sweat trace his temple. He straightened his tie, a hand-me-down from his uncle, and inhaled deeply. He recalled his purpose: to create something meaningful, something impactful. Mr. Henderson, a man with a kind countenance and a soothingly calm demeanor, greeted them warmly. His office possessed a surprising warmth, filled with greenery and framed family snapshots. Jake launched into a spiel, his voice initially wavering but gradually gaining strength as he articulated his vision for Evergreen Eats. He detailed the sustainable methods, the locally sourced ingredients, the dedication to minimizing food waste. He even showed Mr. Henderson a mock-up of the biodegradable packaging. That Mr. Henderson listened intently, occasionally posing clarifying questions. That he seemed genuinely engaged, but Jake detected a hint of skepticism lurking beneath the surface. "It's a commendable concept, Mr. Rodriguez," Mr. Henderson commented, once Jake had concluded. "But the food delivery arena is crowded. What distinguishes Evergreen Eats?" Jake emphasized the sustainability aspect. "We're not simply delivering meals, Mr. Henderson. We're delivering a solution. We're providing consumers a convenient means to support local producers and lessen their ecological footprint." He then highlighted the community dimension, explaining his plans to collaborate with local charities to address food scarcity. He spoke of the ripple effect of kindness, how his initial act of generosity spurred him to develop something beneficial to others. Mr. Henderson leaned back, lost in thought. "And how do you intend to ensure profitability? This is, after all, a business." Jake presented his financial forecasts, carefully outlining his revenue model and cost control measures. He illustrated how he aimed to scale the venture gradually, commencing with a small fleet of electric bikes and expanding as demand increased. The meeting extended beyond an hour. When it finally concluded, Jake felt depleted yet strangely invigorated. He had laid everything on the line, revealed his hopes and dreams. Now, all he could do was await the verdict. The call arrived 3 days later. Jake was hunched over his computer, wrestling with a particularly troublesome line of code, when his phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson. Jake held his breath as he answered. "Mr. Rodriguez," Mr. Henderson stated, his tone careful. "We've evaluated your application, and we've opted to approve a small business loan." Jake's heart soared. He couldn't process it. He had succeeded. "However," Mr. Henderson continued, "there are some stipulations. We're offering a reduced amount compared to your request, and will require routine progress updates. We'd also like you to participate in the bank's small business mentorship program." Jake disregarded the caveats that he had secured funding, that he had taken the first tangible step toward realizing Evergreen Eats. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Jake responded, his voice trembling. "Thank you immensely." He ended the call and released a whoop of elation that startled his cat, Kepler, who swiftly bolted from the sofa and sought refuge beneath the bed. Jake was unfazed. He seized his laptop and raced to Anna's office, his heart thrumming with excitement. Anna greeted him with a knowing expression. "So, how did it unfold?" "I got the loan," Jake exclaimed, radiating joy. "It's less than we wanted, but it's adequate to begin." Anna rose and embraced him warmly. "Congratulations, Jake. I knew you were capable." That night, sleep eluded Jake. He lay in bed, gazing at the ceiling, his mind swirling with possibilities. He held the funding, a solid strategy, a mentor who had faith in him. He was one step nearer to transforming his vision into reality. He understood the path ahead would be long and arduous, but he felt ready. That he was poised to build Evergreen Eats. He yearned to make a lasting impact. From kitchen to community, Rosemary's pungent perfume battled roasted vegetables for supremacy in Jake's cramped kitchen, a space better acquainted with instant noodles than gourmet aspirations. This evening, though, the room hummed with purpose. He diced carrots with practiced ease, the knife a silver flash against the scarred cutting board, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap a grounding influence on his fluttering nerves. Evergreen Eats had officially launched, its entire operation consisting of him, his trusty bicycle, and a smattering of pre-orders secured from friends and neighbors. He dedicated the past week to transforming his living room into a makeshift dispatch center. Piles of biodegradable containers crowded one wall, accompanied by rolls of eco-friendly tape and a printer churning out delivery slips. Anna, ever the organizational guru, had devised a delivery system so efficient. Even Jake, with his coding acumen, was impressed. Each dish was a tangible expression of his dedication to environmental responsibility. Veggies plucked fresh from Farmer McGregor's nearby plot, ethically raised poultry from a regional farm cooperative, and packaging designed to decompose with impressive speed. His gaze drifted to the handwritten menu, a single page, printed on post-consumer recycled paper, showcasing 3 carefully curated entrees plus dessert. Restraint was vital, both for his peace of mind and his limited resources. As he assembled the initial orders, a wave of trepidation threatened to engulf him. What if the food proved unpalatable? What if his bike succumbed to mechanical failure mid-route? What if, despite meticulous planning, Evergreen Eats turned out to be a resounding failure? He banished these anxieties. Centering his attention on the task at hand, he spooned a generous helping of roasted vegetable risotto into a container. Its vibrant hues a small triumph against the gathering shadows of his worries. First stop, Mrs. Henderson, the kind elderly woman across the hall whose unwavering support had been a surprising source of encouragement. He nestled the container securely in his insulated bag, double-checked the address, and ventured into the hallway. The elevator wheezed and rattled its descent, each grown a pregnant pause before his moment of truth. Emerging onto the pavement, a shot of adrenaline coursed through him. Was it that he was actually doing this? Mrs. Henderson greeted him with a radiant smile that etched fine lines around her eyes. "Jake, dear, you're a godsend. My arthritis has been particularly bothersome today." He presented her with the risotto, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "I hope you enjoy it, Mrs. Henderson. Please let me know what you think." "Oh, I'm certain I will," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "Everything you make is certain to be delightful. Besides, I am supporting my favorite local entrepreneur." Her praise was a sweet draft of confidence that he swung onto his bike and pedaled toward his next drop-off, a young couple, Sarah and David, living just a few blocks away. The evening air was invigorating, the descending sun splashing the cityscape with shades of apricot and lavender. For the first time in what felt like eons, he experienced a sense of conviction, a feeling he was finally heading in the right direction. Sarah and David gushed over the chicken and veggie skewers. Sarah, a passionate food blogger, even documented them with her phone for her Instagram feed. "This is phenomenal, Jake, and the fact that it's all sustainable. Even more impressive," she declared, brandishing her device. "I'm absolutely posting about this." David, between bites, chimed in, "Seriously amazing, better than any delivery food." News traveled swiftly. Within a week, Jake had cultivated a small but devoted clientele. He learned their names, their dietary quirks, their preferred dishes. He even began including personalized notes with each delivery, expressing his gratitude and sharing an intriguing fact about sustainable farming. One evening, following an especially demanding delivery cycle, he discovered an envelope slid beneath his door. It was from Ms. Perkins. His breath caught. He hadn't communicated with her in any way since the day of his dismissal. That a tight knot of apprehension formed in his stomach. Why now? He hesitated, then carefully unfolded the letter. The script was wavering, almost indecipherable. "Jake," it began, "I've learned about your new business, Evergreen Eats. I admire your spirit and your dedication to making a difference. That I know no words can mend the past, but I sincerely regret my actions. That it was wrong of me to penalize you for your compassion. That I've been giving things much thought, and I've decided to contribute to a local food bank. It's a token, but I hope it alleviates some pain. Wishing you well in your business, Ms. Perkins." He reviewed the letter again and again, his initial unease slowly yielding to disbelief that Ms. Perkins, the very person who had derailed his career trajectory, was offering an apology and donating to a food bank. That it was a subtle gesture, yet it felt seismic. The reverberations of his simple act of kindness were extending far beyond his expectations. That it had sparked a GoFundMe initiative, a career-altering job opportunity, and now a message of contrition from the individual who had wronged him. He affixed the note to his refrigerator, adjacent to the Evergreen Eats menu. That it served as a constant reminder that even in the face of hardship, compassion could triumph. The following week, Jake broadened his culinary repertoire, introducing a vegan option and a gluten-free confection. He also upgraded to a larger delivery pack and a more robust bike lock. Evergreen Eats was flourishing, steadily but surely. One evening, while concocting a batch of his trademark chocolate avocado mousse, his cell phone chimed. It was Anna. "Jake, you won't believe this," she exclaimed, her voice buzzing with elation. "Remember that food blogger, Sarah? The one who featured your skewers? Her post went viral. Seriously viral. Evergreen Eats is trending." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "Trending? What do you mean trending?" "I mean, people are actually talking about you, about your food, about your mission. That we're swamped with new orders, Jake. Swamped. I think we might need to hire someone. He stared at the bubbling chocolate mousse, a slow smile illuminating his features. He was no longer merely a fired coder. He was an entrepreneur, a chef, a community organizer. He was making a difference, one sustainable meal at a time. And he suspected this was only the prelude. Green Grub's offer. Brenda Perkins watched the Evergreen Eats truck, a vibrant emerald slash against the parking lot's dull gray, depart from a house across the street. A sigh escaped her, the bitter taste of remorse lingering. Heavier even than the aroma of sizzling patties, 0.6 months had passed since the fateful phone call. The one that severed Jake Rodriguez's connection to her McDonald's. 0.6 months since she'd prioritized corporate decree over what she now understood as genuine kindness that she'd stumbled upon. The articles caught snippets of news reports. McDonald's blunder. Termination sparks sustainable cuisine craze. A headline declared IT was humiliating, yes, but also inspiring. Evergreen Eats wasn't a mere fad. It was flourishing. The small act of compassion Jake had nurtured, even at his own expense, had sprouted into something truly remarkable. Weekends found her drawn to his establishment, observing the long queue of patrons winding down the block. The fragrance of garden fresh, locally sourced fare drifted on the breeze, a world apart from the manufactured scent that clung to her own uniform. Brenda adjusted her visor, the golden arches a persistent emblem of her unwavering adherence to the rulebook, regulations that, in this instance, had been patently wrong. She considered reaching out to Jake, offering a heartfelt apology, but the words turned to ash in her mouth. What could she possibly articulate? Sorry I derailed your career, but hey, look at you now, felt inadequate. Meanwhile, within Evergreen Eats, the midday rush surged. Jake, brows slick with perspiration, expertly crafted a colorful salad, his hands dancing with practiced grace. The atmosphere buzzed with the clatter of cookware, the lively chatter of the staff, and the contented murmurs of patrons. He relished this energy. He cherished the sense of building something significant, something that nourished both body and spirit. Abruptly, a figure detached itself from the waiting throng and approached the counter. He was imposing, clad in an impeccably tailored suit that whispered of wealth and radiated an aura of assured power. His smile was broad, polished, and subtly unnerving. "Jake Rodriguez?" he inquired, extending a hand. "Robert Henderson, CEO of Green Grub." Jake wiped his hands on his apron and accepted Henderson's handshake, taken aback. Green Grub was a major force in the fast-casual dining landscape, a chain with locations spanning numerous states. Their advertising touted farm-fresh ingredients and eco-conscious initiatives, but Jake had always perceived it as more of a marketing ploy than a genuine commitment. "Mr. Henderson," Jake responded, striving for neutrality. "What brings you to Evergreen Eats?" Henderson's smile widened, a shark-like grin. "Let's just say I've been impressed, profoundly impressed, that you've cultivated something exceptional here, Jake, something that connects with people. And quite frankly," he lowered his voice, "something Green Grub could use a bit more of." He gestured toward the bustling dining area. "The authenticity, the fervor. It's palpable that we've been tracking your success, and we believe that Evergreen Eats has the potential for exponential growth, substantial growth." Jake felt a prickle of apprehension. He anticipated what was coming next. "What are you proposing, Mr. Henderson?" "A collaboration, Jake. Green Grub wishes to invest in Evergreen Eats that we can supply the resources, the infrastructure, the marketing prowess to propel your concept nationwide. Imagine it, Evergreen Eats in every major city, serving sustainable, delectable cuisine to millions." The proposition was alluring, undeniably so. The prospect of broadening Evergreen Eats' reach, of making a tangible impact on a grander scale, held immense appeal. Yet something felt amiss. The Henderson's smile struck him as a little too rehearsed, his pronouncements a little too scripted. "What would that involve?" Jake inquired cautiously. "Straightforward," Henderson stated smoothly. "We acquire a controlling interest in Evergreen Eats. You remain on board as the face of the brand, overseeing menu development and maintaining quality control, that we manage the business aspects, expansion, marketing, logistics, that a mutually beneficial arrangement. And the sourcing? Jake pressed. Would we adhere to sourcing from local farmers, maintaining sustainable practices? Henderson paused almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something indecipherable in his gaze. Naturally, he replied, a tad too hastily. Sustainability is a cornerstone of the Green Grub brand, that we'd simply refine the process, leveraging our existing supply chains to guarantee consistency and efficiency. Jake frowned. Refine, efficiency. The words sounded like a death knell for the values he had poured his heart and soul in. He pictured corporate accountants scrutinizing every penny, pushing for cheaper commodities, sacrificing excellence for increased profit margins. I require some time to consider your offer, Mr. Henderson, Jake stated, his voice resolute. Of course, Henderson responded, his smile unwavering, a predator anticipating its prey. But don't delay too long, Jake. Opportunities of this magnitude are rare. He presented Jake with a business card. Give me a call when you're prepared to discuss specifics. As Henderson departed, a surge of conflicting emotions flooded Jake. Elation, trepidation, uncertainty. He had forged Evergreen Eats from the ground up, infusing every aspect with his passion. Could he genuinely entrust a corporate titan like Green Grub to safeguard his vision? Or would they gradually erode the very values that made Evergreen Eats unique? Later that evening, after the last patron had departed and the staff had completed their closing duties, Jake sat alone in the hushed restaurant. The essence of herbs and spices still lingering in the atmosphere, he gazed out the window at the darkening street. The neon radiance of the Evergreen Eats sign reflected in his eyes like a beacon. He retrieved Henderson's card and turned it over and over in his hands. The allure of expansion, of reaching a broader audience, was undeniably captivating. But at what cost? He thought of the local farmers he partnered with, the small enterprises he supported, the community he had nurtured. Could he truly risk jeopardizing all of that for the sake of advancement? He recalled Ms. Perkins, her expression etched with regret as she watched the Evergreen Eats truck drive away, that he reflected on the opportunity he had been presented with, the chance to demonstrate that compassion and goodwill could be a successful business strategy. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, an oppressive force that he understood that whatever he elected, it would generate a ripple effect, impacting not only his own trajectory, but the lives of everyone associated with Evergreen Eats. The question was, would that ripple be one of affirmative transformation, or would it be a cascade of compromise and disappointment? He felt more adrift and perplexed than he had felt since the day Ms. Perkins had terminated his employment. He missed Elon, that he missed the simplicity of that one charitable gesture. He'd had no inkling that one complimentary burger would precipitate all of this. The hum of the restaurant's fluorescent lights surrounded him, a constant echo of the glaring lights of the McDonald's he had left behind. He closed his eyes, took a deliberate breath, and sought the clarity he desperately needed. He knew, at his core, that the answer resided not in the promise of affluence or acclaim, but in the steadfast commitment to the values that had propelled him this far. He just wasn't certain he was resilient enough to decline what was, outwardly, the break of a lifetime. He knew he had to seek counsel. But whom? Could he trust to offer him candid, unbiased guidance? He certainly couldn't consult his mother. She would urge him to seize the money and run. He required someone who comprehended the intricacies of managing a business, someone who shared his principles, someone who could assist him in navigating this perilous terrain. He opened his eyes, a flicker of hope igniting in his gaze, that he knew precisely whom to contact. Negotiating sustainability. Robert Henderson's private jet was predictably opulent. Jake, used to the repurposed furniture in his Evergreen Eats office, felt a twinge of unease as he sank into the plush leather seat. Henderson, a man whose smile seemed permanently affixed, offered a glass of champagne. Jake politely declined, opting for water. So, Jake, Henderson began, his voice a low rumble. Evergreen Eats, quite the splash you've made. Sustainable, ethical, it's all the rage, isn't it? He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jake took a sip of water. We believe it's more than a trend, Mr. Henderson, but it's a necessity. Of course, and Green Grub recognizes that that's why we're so keen on this partnership. Imagine, Jake, the reach we could have together. Green Grub's infrastructure, your brand, that it's a win-win. The word brand tasted like ash in Jake's mouth. He knew Green Grub's reach was immense, that he also knew their environmental record was less than stellar. He'd seen the reports, the investigations into their sourcing practices, the allegations of greenwashing. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Henderson, Jake said carefully, but Evergreen Eats is built on principles. Sustainable sourcing, minimal waste, fair labor practices. Those aren't negotiable. Henderson steepled his fingers, his smile unwavering. Negotiable, Jake? Everything is negotiable. We're talking about exponential growth, access to resources you can only dream of, that we can streamline your processes, improve efficiency. Sometimes a little compromise is necessary for the greater good. Jake leaned forward. The greater good can't come at the expense of our planet, or the people who work to feed us. That I'm not interested in compromising on that. He thought about Maria and her family, relying on Evergreen Eats for fair wages and dignified work. He thought about the local farmers he'd built relationships with, trusting him to uphold his promises. He wouldn't betray them for a bigger bottom line. That Henderson's smile tightened. Just a fraction. Let's be realistic, Jake, that you're a small operation. Green Grub can provide the scale you need to truly make a difference. Scale without integrity is just bigger damage, Jake countered. I'm not saying Green Grub hasn't done good things, but I know your sourcing isn't always transparent. Henderson sighed, a theatrical gesture. Transparency is a complex issue, Jake, that we're dealing with global supply chains. Things aren't always black and white. They should be green, Jake said, a touch of steel in his voice. And that's what I need to be sure of. If we're going to partner, that I need guarantees. Control over sourcing, audits, the ability to veto practices that don't align with our values. The plane hit a patch of turbulence. Henderson didn't seem to notice. He was staring at Jake, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Henderson spoke. That's a rather unconventional proposal, Jake, that you're essentially asking to run a significant portion of our supply chain. I'm asking to ensure that your supply chain meets the standards that I'm willing to put my name on, Jake clarified. And, frankly, the standards that consumers are increasingly demanding. Henderson swiveled in his chair, looking out the window at the clouds below. The market is fickle, Jake. Today it's sustainability, tomorrow it's something else. That you're putting a lot of faith in a trend. I'm putting faith in people wanting to do the right thing, Jake said. And I believe that's not a trend, that's a fundamental human desire. Another long silence. Jake could practically hear the gears turning in Henderson's head. Calculating, strategizing, he braced himself for a flat rejection, prepared to walk away from the entire deal. Then Henderson turned back, the smile returning, but this time it felt different, almost genuine. All right, Jake, let's talk specifics. What kind of control are we talking about? The next few hours were a whirlwind of negotiations. Jake, drawing on the mentorship of people he'd met through Evergreen Eats, laid out his terms. Point by point, he insisted on a dedicated team within Green Grub, reporting directly to him, responsible for auditing and overseeing sustainable sourcing. He demanded transparency in their supply chains, with access to all relevant data. He stipulated that Evergreen Eats would have the right to pull out of the partnership if Green Grub failed to meet agreed-upon standards. Henderson pushed back, of course. He argued about costs, logistics, the potential for delays. But Jake stood his ground, reminding him of the value Evergreen Eats brought to the table: a loyal customer base, a reputation for authenticity, and a story that resonated with millions. Finally, as the plane began its descent, they reached an agreement. Jake would have significant, though not absolute, control over Green Grub's sustainable sourcing initiatives. That he would have a dedicated team and the power to veto practices that violated his principles. Green Grub would invest in sustainable agriculture and waste reduction programs. IT wasn't everything Jake wanted, but it was a major victory, a real opportunity to influence a massive corporation from the inside. So, we have a deal? Henderson asked, extending his hand. Jake shook it, a cautious optimism blooming in his chest. We have a deal, but this is just the beginning. The real work starts now. As Jake disembarked the jet, He felt a sense of both exhilaration and apprehension that he'd just made a pact with the devil, or at least a very powerful and potentially ruthless CEO that he knew the road ahead would be challenging, full of compromises and battles. But he also knew that he had the chance to make a real difference, to push Green Grub towards a more sustainable future. He pictured Maria's hopeful face, the determined expressions of the local farmers. He wouldn't let them down. Back on solid ground, Jake pulled out his phone and texted Maria. "Big news, stop by the office tomorrow." He added a winking emoji that he then called Brenda Perkins that it was time to talk, to see if Evergreen Eats could extend a second chance, a hand up to someone who needed it. The ripple effect of kindness, he thought, was just beginning, scaling up. The Green Grub logo, a stylized sprout bursting from the earth, was now subtly incorporated into the Evergreen Eats app. Jake stared at it, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. IT was happening. Evergreen Eats was scaling up, leveraging Green Grub's vast infrastructure to reach corners of the city he'd only dreamed of before. The first week was a whirlwind. Green Grub's logistics team descended upon Evergreen Eats' modest headquarters, a converted garage in Jake's neighborhood. They were efficient, almost surgical in their integration. Green Grub's drivers, a sea of bright green jackets, now sported a small Evergreen Eats patch on their sleeves. Their delivery radius expanded exponentially. Orders poured in. "Jake, we're hitting numbers we never thought possible." Maria, his operations manager, yelled over the din of ringing phones. Her face, usually pale with worry, was flushed with excitement. "We're going to need to hire more people, a lot more." Hiring at IT was exhilarating and terrifying. He remembered being on the other side of the table, desperate for a chance. Any chance that he was determined to do it differently. He wanted to build a team that reflected his values, a team that believed in the mission. "Let's focus on our community first," Jake said, grabbing a whiteboard marker and sketching out a plan. "Reach out to the local community centers. Offer training programs that let's give people opportunities they might not otherwise have." He remembered Ms. Perkins, that he wondered where she was now. Had she found another job? Was she okay? The thought lingered, a small prick of guilt amidst the burgeoning success. The next few weeks were a blur of interviews, onboarding, and training. Jake poured his energy into shaping the new recruits, instilling in them the importance of sustainability, of community, of treating every customer like they were family. He shared his story, the story of a fired McDonald's employee who dared to dream bigger, of a chance encounter with Elon Musk, of a community that rallied behind him. The new hires were a diverse group, a tapestry of backgrounds and experiences. There was Miguel, a former construction worker looking for a more stable job; Aisha, a recent immigrant with a passion for healthy food; and even Carlos, a retired chef who yearned to share his culinary expertise. One afternoon, Jake was walking through the bustling kitchen, now significantly larger thanks to Green Grub's resources, when he spotted a familiar face. "Ms. Perkins?" he asked, a mixture of surprise and apprehension in his voice. The woman looked up, her eyes widening behind her thick-rimmed glasses. "Jake? Jake Rodriguez? Is that you?" She looked different. Gone was the rigid posture and the harried expression. She seemed softer. "What are you doing here?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I saw the news," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "About Evergreen Eats, about what you're doing for the community, and I wanted to be a part of it." Jake was speechless. "I know I wasn't kind to you," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I was under a lot of pressure, and I made a mistake, the big one." He remembered the humiliation, the anger, but he also remembered the helplessness in her eyes, the desperation to keep her job. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Ms. Perkins," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Evergreen Eats." She took his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Thank you, Jake. Thank you." He hired her as a customer service representative, a role that suited her meticulous attention to detail and her newfound empathy. She blossomed in the new environment, offering thoughtful solutions and building genuine connections with customers. The expansion wasn't without its challenges. Scaling up meant increased costs, tighter margins, and a whole new level of competition. Green Grub's influence, while beneficial in many ways, also brought its own set of pressures. Robert Henderson, despite their agreement, occasionally nudged Jake towards decisions that prioritize profit over principles. "Jake, look at these numbers," Henderson said during one of their weekly video calls, his face projected onto a large screen in Jake's office. "We could significantly increase our profit margin by switching to a cheaper, less sustainable packaging option. And no one will even notice." Jake stood his ground. "We made an agreement, Robert. Sustainability is not negotiable." Henderson sighed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Jake, you have to be realistic. We're running a business here. We can't afford to be idealistic." "We can't afford not to be," Jake countered. "Our customers value sustainability. That's part of our brand. But if we compromise on that, we lose their trust." The argument went back and forth, a familiar dance between profit and principle. Jake knew he had to tread carefully. He needed Green Grub's resources, but he couldn't allow them to erode his values. He found allies within Green Grub, employees who believed in his vision and quietly supported his efforts. They helped him navigate the corporate bureaucracy, identify sustainable alternatives, and build a stronger case for ethical sourcing. One evening, exhausted but satisfied, Jake sat in his office, reviewing the latest sales figures. Revenue was up, customer satisfaction was high, and the impact on the community was undeniable. Evergreen Eats was not just delivering food. It was delivering hope, opportunity, and a better future. He received an unexpected text message from Robert Henderson. "Drinks at my place. Tonight, 8 p.m. Jake hesitated. He wasn't sure what to expect. Another argument, another attempt to compromise his values. But he decided to go. He owed it to himself and to the team to hear what Henderson had to say. Henderson's apartment was a sleek, modern penthouse overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, a dazzling display of lights stretching as far as the eye could see. "Nice place," Jake said, trying to sound casual. "Thank you," Henderson replied, handing him a glass of aged scotch. "I wanted to apologize." Jake raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I've been watching you, Jake," Henderson continued, taking a sip of his drink. "Watching how you lead your team, how you connect with the community, how you stick to your principles. I have to admit, I was skeptical at first and I thought you were just another naive idealist. But I was wrong." He paused, his gaze fixed on the city lights. "You've shown me that it's possible to be successful and still do the right thing. And frankly, it's inspiring." Jake didn't know what to say. He'd expected a fight, not an admission of defeat. "I still believe in making a profit," Henderson said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "But I'm starting to see that profit doesn't have to come at the expense of everything else. Maybe we can build something truly great together." Jake looked at Henderson, really looked at him, and saw something he hadn't seen before, a flicker of genuine hope. Maybe, just maybe, Robert Henderson was changing. Maybe the ripple effect of kindness, the seed planted by a simple act of generosity, was spreading further than he ever imagined. He raised his glass. "To Evergreen Eats," he said, "and to a more sustainable future." Henderson clinked his glass against Jake's. "To a more sustainable future," he echoed. "And to second chances, recognition, and revelation." The ballroom simmered with hushed excitement. Backstage at the Global Sustainability Summit, Jake battled a rising tide of nerves that he fiddled with the mic, its metallic chill a small point of focus against his escalating unease. Through the flimsy divide, and his composed tones washed over him. Her introduction lauded Evergreen Eats as a bright promise. Proof of ethical enterprise's potency. He risked a peek that a sea of faces met him, a tableau of academics, CEOs, and eager students. He spotted a few luminaries he'd only encountered in articles, trailblazers in renewable energy, advocates for fair trade, individuals he'd revered from afar. Now, he was about to address them. And now, please welcome Jake Rodriguez, the driving force behind Evergreen Eats, who will share his remarkable journey from hardship to positive impact. Anna's amplified voice surged, an irresistible current propelling him forward. Inhaling deeply, he summoned a confident grin and stepped into the spotlight. Polite applause rippled out. He approached the podium, the Evergreen Eats logo projected behind him, a vibrant green emblem against the muted backdrop. "Good morning," he greeted, his voice sounding surprisingly firm. "I'm Jake Rodriguez, and until fairly recently, I was just another guy behind the grill at McDonald's. A ripple of amusement spread through the gathering. But a rather extraordinary sequence of events brought me here. He launched into his narrative, the tale of his goodwill toward the disguised Elon Musk, the subsequent dismissal, the unexpected donation, and the blossoming of Evergreen Eats. He spoke with fervor about his devotion to sustainable practices, from local sourcing to minimal waste. He detailed the hurdles he'd cleared, the grueling hours, the initial skepticism, and the steadfast loyalty of his crew. That he recounted Ms. Perkins' evolution from a demanding supervisor to a fervent champion of socially responsible business. That he wove in anecdotes illustrating Evergreen Eats' positive influence on the area, providing employment, supporting local agriculture, and providing nutritious, affordable options. That he highlighted the cascading effect of small acts, how a single kindness could spawn something truly significant. As he spoke, the room stilled, rapt. He noticed nods of affirmation, encouraging smiles, even the subtle dabbing of tears. He felt an intense bond, a shared recognition of business driven by purpose. He concluded with a call to action. We each hold a piece of the puzzle in building a more sustainable tomorrow, he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. Whether it's patronizing local ventures, lessening our footprint, or simply extending a little more grace, every gesture matters. That let's collaborate to forge a world where businesses value people and the planet as much as profit. An explosion of applause followed, culminating in a standing ovation. The room buzzing with energy. A wave of gratitude washed over him. A profound sense of achievement. He had discovered his calling and was resolute in his determination to make a difference. Post-speech, he found himself encircled by people eager to connect, offer congratulations, and discover more about Evergreen Eats. Anna deftly guided him through the throng, introducing him to influential figures in the sustainability sphere, potential backers, and fellow entrepreneurs. That evening, a celebratory gala punctuated the summit. Jake, still riding high from the day's events, was seated beside Anna at a table near the dais. He savored the stimulating conversation, the delicious food, and the pervasive atmosphere of optimism and cooperation. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and a palpable silence descended. The event organizer took to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we're honored to have a special guest tonight, a long-standing supporter of sustainable endeavors and a tireless advocate for innovation. Please welcome Elon Musk." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Jake's jaw went slack. He watched Elon Musk stride confidently onto the stage, a playful spark in his eyes. "Good evening," Musk began, his tone relaxed and inviting. "I've been following the Global Sustainability Summit for years, and I'm consistently impressed by the passion and ingenuity of the individuals and organizations striving for a better world." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Tonight, I want to acknowledge someone who perfectly embodies the spirit of innovation and social responsibility. This individual took a challenging circumstance and transformed it into an opportunity to create something truly exceptional." A nervous tremor ran through Jake. He had a strong premonition. "Some months ago," Musk continued, "I found myself craving a quick bite. That I was incognito, hoping to avoid attention, when a young man, employed at a local McDonald's, offered me a meal on the house, despite the potential ramifications." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Heads swiveled in Jake's direction. His cheeks burned. "That young man," Musk said, his voice laced with admiration, "was Jake Rodriguez." The applause thundered. That a surge of emotion overwhelmed Jake. He saw Anna, her face lit with pride. "Jake's generosity resonated with me," Musk continued. "It reminded me of the significance of human connection and the strength of small acts. Consequently, I decided to make an anonymous donation to help him launch his own venture." A collective gasp filled the space. The identity of the mystery benefactor had been revealed. "I've been observing Evergreen Eats' trajectory with considerable interest," Musk said, "and I'm deeply impressed by Jake's accomplishments. That he's not merely building a thriving business. He's generating a positive effect on his community and fostering a more sustainable food ecosystem." He turned his attention directly to Jake. Jake, you're an inspiration to us all that you've demonstrated that anything is attainable with perseverance, commitment, and a dedication to doing what's right. Musk then revealed his pledge of further investment in Evergreen Eats, aimed at expanding its outreach and influence. The applause was deafening as a wave of gratitude surged through Jake, directed towards Musk, towards Anna, towards everyone who had supported him along his journey. That he rose, his heart brimming. He seized a microphone from the table. I'm beyond words. He managed, his voice thick with emotion. I never envisioned my life taking this trajectory. I'm profoundly grateful to Mr. Musk for his generosity and his faith in me, and I'm indebted to Anna for her unwavering support and guidance. He paused, inhaled deeply, and scanned the crowd. I pledge to utilize this platform to affect change. Continue developing Evergreen Eats into a force for good. Inspire others to pursue their passions and to establish businesses that prioritize people and the planet. Thank you. He raised his glass in a toast. The room followed suit, a chorus of clinking glasses celebrating hope and possibility. The sense of responsibility settled on Jake's shoulders, a promise to honor the trust placed in him. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but he was prepared to face anything, knowing he was surrounded by a community that shared his vision for a more sustainable and just future. The knot of anxiety had dissolved, replaced by a quiet, resolute calm that he was no longer simply Jake Rodriguez, the terminated McDonald's employee. That he was Jake Rodriguez, the founder of Evergreen Eats, and he was only just beginning. Giving back. The thunderous ovation from the Global Sustainability Summit still resonated within Jake, a joyous echo contrasting with the whir of Evergreen Eats bikes weaving through the urban grid. Elon's announcement hadn't just provided a boost. It had been a meteoric launch. He felt the press of expectation, yes, but also a deep wellspring of conviction. And no longer simply a businessman. He was now a standard-bearer. He sat in his office, the waning sun painting long, expressive strokes across the reclaimed wood of his desk. Turning from side to side in his chair, he surveyed the vibrant hum of Evergreen Eats Central. It still felt implausible that a mere year prior, he'd been a short-order cook, his horizon no broader than the daily specials. Now, he commanded a platform, possessed resources, and bore a solemn obligation to give back. His fingers danced over his phone, stopping at a name he hadn't touched in months. Brenda Perkins, his old supervisor. A tight clench formed in his gut. He hadn't forgotten the barb of her words, the offhand way she dismissed his aspirations. Yet he also recalled a fleeting glimmer in her eyes, a whisper of remorse, perhaps even a dawning understanding. He paused, then tapped call. The line rang thrice before she answered, her voice uncertain. Hello, Miss Perkins, Jake Rodriguez here. A prolonged silence stretched between them. He could almost perceive the gears turning in her mind. At last, she spoke, her tone guarded. Jake, I watched your speech done on the news. Yes, ma'am, but I was wondering if we could connect. I'm at a loss for words, she admitted quietly. I was wrong. We all err, Ms. Perkins. The measure lies in how we address those missteps. That I'm a believer in redemption. He hesitated. I was hoping you might entertain the notion of one. He outlined his proposition. The Evergreen Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to nurturing burgeoning entrepreneurs with forward-thinking and eco-conscious business concepts. He envisioned providing startup capital, mentorship, and access to vital resources often beyond their reach. It's nascent, I know, he confessed, but I genuinely believe it could impact lives, and I believe your insights would be a significant asset. Your grasp of the fast food sector, the realities people face, is invaluable. Another beat of silence hung in the air. Then, a tremulous, what would I do? The role is still being defined. We're in the formative stage. But I foresee opportunities to guide young talent, refine their business blueprints, perhaps even oversee aspects of the foundation's operations. Think of it as channeling your expertise to help others sidestep the obstacles you've encountered, and perhaps even erected, in the past. He stilled, awaiting her response. I don't deserve such a chance, she finally whispered, her voice thick. Perhaps not, but I'm extending it regardless. Give it some thought, Ms. Perkins, and let me know your decision. He disconnected, a blend of relief and trepidation washing over him. He'd played his hand. The rest was up to her. Returning his focus to the Evergreen Foundation, Jake began scribbling ideas on a whiteboard. He imagined a dynamic collaboration hub, a place where young innovators could convene, learn together, and give form to their ambitions. That he wanted to craft something truly exceptional, a legacy that would resonate long into the future. Days passed before Ms. Perkins' call came. I'd like to volunteer, she stated, her voice firmer now. I want to contribute. Jake felt a rush of optimism. That's fantastic, Ms. Perkins, that will find just the right fit for you. He was unsure what to anticipate, but when Ms. Perkins arrived at Evergreen Eats headquarters, the transformation was unmistakable. Her posture was more subdued, her gaze gentler. She seemed chastened. Thank you, Jake, she offered, extending her hand. For this opportunity, he gripped her hand in a firm shake. Welcome aboard, Ms. Perkins, that we have much to accomplish. Ms. Perkins immersed herself in her duties with quiet resolve. She devoted countless hours exploring grant prospects, structuring mentoring initiatives, and cultivating relationships with local schools and community groups. Helping others seemed to fuel her, offering a sense of atonement as she steered young entrepreneurs forward. Witnessing her evolution, Jake understood that Evergreen Eats was more than just about sustainably sourced cuisine. It was about nurturing sustainable lives, about empowering individuals to flourish. That a few weeks later, Jake felt the pull of his past. He drove to the McDonald's where he had once been dismissed. The iconic golden arches loomed, stark reminders of a former existence. He parked, inhaled deeply, and entered. The aroma of frying potatoes and greasy patties assaulted him. He surveyed the room, spotting a few familiar faces. Maria, always a source of kindness, was wiping tables. That he noticed a young man, barely older than he had been, wrestling with the recalcitrant milkshake machine. He approached the service counter and ordered coffee. As he waited, Maria recognized him, her expression lighting up with surprise. Jake, is that truly you? He grinned. Hey, Maria, how have you been? I'm doing great. We all saw you on television. We were so excited for you. You're achieving incredible things. Thanks, Maria. I owe much of it to people like you. He gestured at their surroundings. This place taught me a lot. His coffee was ready, and he collected it with a grateful nod. I wanted to stop by and express my gratitude to everyone. You all treated me fairly, even when I was just starting out. He retrieved a handful of Evergreen Eats gift certificates from his pocket. I'd like to offer these as a small token of my appreciation to everyone who works here. Tears glistened in Maria's eyes. Jake, you didn't have to do that. I wanted to, and I also wanted to extend another opportunity. He lowered his voice. Evergreen Eats is expanding, and we're perpetually seeking talented individuals. That if anyone here is open to exploring new possibilities, I'd welcome a chance to talk. That we provide competitive salaries, benefits, and the opportunity to contribute to a company with a meaningful mission. He handed Maria a business card. Please circulate this. Tell them to reach out if they're interested. As he turned to leave, he noticed the young man struggling once again with a milkshake dispenser. He walked over and offered assistance. Here, allow me to demonstrate a trick, he said, illustrating the proper method. Sometimes it just requires a bit of finesse. The young man's face brightened. Wow, thanks. I've been battling this all day. No problem, Jake replied. We all start somewhere. He paused. Hey, if you're seeking something more, you might want to check out Evergreen Eats. That it's a solid place to work. He pressed a card into the young man's hand and smiled. Best of luck with those milkshakes. Stepping out of the McDonald's, Jake felt an exquisite sense of completion. He had come full circle. He had confronted his past, acknowledged his failings, and offered a helping hand to those still striving. The sunset cast a warm, honeyed light across the cityscape. Jake climbed back into his car and headed toward the Evergreen Eats headquarters. That he knew the road ahead would be demanding. Yet he was ready. That he possessed a vision, a dedicated team, and a driving purpose that he was determined to make a difference, one sustainable meal at a time. Picturing Ms. Perkins, now diligently seeking grants for the foundation, a swell of warmth filled him. The ripple effect of compassion, he realized, could alter the world's course. All it took was an act of generosity, an act of belief, and an opportunity to repay what had been given. The future, he sensed, was alive with promise.